away from the traditional bank necessarily holding the note to almost like a lending mill type operation where you had institutions that got really good at issuing mortgages. And they looked at a mortgage not as something I'm going to have for 30 years, but something I'm going to have for 180 days until I sell it off on Wall Street. And they were less concerned with what the buyer of the home was, and they were more concerned with what can I sell on Wall Street. Well, as Wall Street and a lot of the investors started to say this, not paying attention, not doing the due diligence. When they said, well, we can do these subprime loans and package them in with the prime loans, and Wall Street, they'll buy. It's like Mikey likes it; they'll buy anything. And so they stopped doing a lot of the research and the fiscal due diligence that you would normally do. And as a result, you got to a point the competition within the industry, they would drop rates, they would lower the down payments you had to make, they would increase what they would finance, and then it was 80%, 90%, 100%, 125% of the value. And they really didn't care because values were going up so much, they figured they would be okay. So that's really what happened, and it just caused, it's a classic bubble. We've had this in many different markets. It was very much a classic market bubble where people got overexcited and they stopped listening and following the fundamentals. And eventually that merry-go-round is going to stop and it's going to come back. We saw it in the tech cycle where people got overly excited about websites. The good ones like Google, they're still worth a lot. But the other ones, they're worthless now. And that's the same type of thing that's going on here. The difference here is when tech, a lot of that was just website names. There wasn't any intrinsic value. With this, it's people's homes. And there's not a single asset that people are more psychologically attached to than their home. And so it's going to have a bigger impact, and it's going to take longer to work our way through. So 6.5% on consumers that are behind on their mortgage. This is foreclosures. Again, the highest we've ever seen, and we're looking at 2.5%. So you're looking at almost 10% of all mortgages in the United States are either behind on their payments or in foreclosure. Again, remember, it's a supply and demand imbalance, so this is adding even more supply. And we won't be able to get to the bottom of this until we no longer continue to separate those two and we can start eating away at the problem and digging our way out. We have to stop adding new homes to this problem. So until we work through all these foreclosures, we're going to continue to slide and continue to see deflation in the housing market. Once all those foreclosures are done, then we can start digging our way out of it. Oil prices are also having an issue with consumer confidence. I know it just feels this way occasionally when you go to fill up.
Well, it's not just an arm, it's an arm and 9/10.
Yeah, that's right. So they take a little bit of your shoulder.
Yeah.
Oil prices. This is since July of 2003. So this is just the last few years. So anybody that tells you the price of oil has gone up because of the war or because of, it doesn't have anything to do with that. I mean, we're looking back, $30 for a barrel of oil 2 years after 9/11. We had a high of 145. There are other factors that were at play here. The first factor, you can see that just a normal trend line and a drop down. But the growth between $70 a barrel and $100 a barrel, well, actually really the 40 to 90 range, this growth right here had to do with something we call in finance BRIC. Brazil, Russia, India, China. Third world nations that are becoming first world nations in their economies. You've got Chinese that are buying cars, they're buying plastics, they're buying all the things that you need petroleum products to use. India, same thing. And there hasn't been a significant increase in the supply of oil globally. What happens when demand increases, supply doesn't, the price goes up. So most of the growth that we saw between 40 and $80 to $90 has nothing to do with anything other than just national demand or global demand for oil has increased and production has not. And that's going to cause the rates to go up. But why this sudden jump from here up to here? Why did that occur? Well, something you don't hear a lot of. It's the value of the dollar. This is the value of the dollar since July of '07, and it's dropped down. Well, why did the value of the dollar drop? Well, because the housing problem. Federal Reserve was cutting interest rates to help out keep the economy from getting into a bad recession, to help out the financial industry that was having real liquidity problems because of the whole housing mess. And so they were dropping interest rates and opening up lines of credit, making it easier for banks to borrow. Well, when you do that, anytime a central bank does that, it devalues the currency. And so as they cut the rates, the value of the dollar went down. And you've seen a slight increase here recently, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Well, how does that affect oil? Oil is priced in dollars. When your dollar is worth less, not worthless, but worth less than it was yesterday, it takes more of them to buy the same barrel of oil. So most of the increase we've seen in oil actually is due to the value of the dollar taking more dollars to buy that same oil, because most of the oil we buy isn't from the United States. We're buying most of our oil from foreign supplies. If we made all of our oil locally, we wouldn't have seen, the value of the dollar would be irrelevant or less relevant to the cost. Yes.
Dean, how secure is the dollar as the world currency? I mean, I keep hearing all the time that pretty soon it's not going to be the world currency anymore.
It is, it's always been a concern. Were we getting to the point where the U.S. was no longer a safe haven in global crises and financial crises? Would people flock to the euro? Would they flock other places? This has been a global credit crisis, and we've seen them flock to the U.S. again. And so we are still, in many ways, the global currency, and we're the safe. When you're seeing all these things, and let's go back to the last recession, the Phoenician. It was a gigantic project. It was Lincoln Savings and Loan, really beautiful resort. Well, they spent a whole lot of money building the thing, and then they went under as part of the whole S&L crisis, and that thing was taken over by the RTC and auctioned off. It was actually the Kuwaitis who bought it. Now, of course, they have a lot of oil money. They came in and bought it. They probably paid less than it cost to build the thing, and now they're making tons of money. So obviously, there's some good buys that occur during the cycle. But what happens is you're seeing that now. Other foreign folks that have cash are coming in and seeing these as buying opportunities because they know the United States isn't going anywhere, and that this is just a momentary cycle. And so they have money. For whatever reason, they've saved it. They haven't indebted themselves, so they have those dollars, and they're seeing these as buying opportunities, whether it's financial institutions or other things.
So are we not selling off the United States now? I mean, it is being owned and bought by these foreign entities. And I thought, was it Iran? I don't know who it is that said they won't accept U.S. dollars anymore for payment of their oil.
Well, that's Iran, and we don't get any of our oil from Iran anyway. Iran primarily ships to our non-allies, some European countries, and Asian countries, but at the end of the day, that has everything to do with politics and nothing to do with economics. At the end of the day, the bigger issue we have with whether or not the United States is going to be considered the global economy that is sound and AAA rated. Right now, U.S. Treasuries are AAA rated, best rating you can possibly get. It's considered the safest investment on the planet. The risk there is S&P, Standard & Poor's, who rates everything, all financial institutions, has said with the next 15 to 25 years, they are going to have to downgrade U.S. Treasuries if we don't get a handle on Social Security and Medicare. Because right now those things are set to go under in those timeframes, and the U.S. government debt will start to downgrade if we don't get a handle on those problems. So we're not at risk from foreign countries destroying our economy. It's really, we're the only ones that can do that. We can do it to ourselves, but nobody else is going to have, it's not going to be as easy for them to do that to us.
You may be going to address this in a little bit, but how does our trade deficit factor into this?
You have that in a moment. What this slide, and this is, and let me explain this here. You've got the price of oil back to July of '07. You can see the increase. You can see very clearly this is the value of the dollar, and when the Fed cut rates, see how the value of the dollar dropped. In fact, the value of the dollar actually dropped faster than they were cutting rates, as speculators knew the Fed was going to cut more, so they were trying to get ahead of the Fed